Hey guys, this is Mr. Grice for Algebra Unit 8.1 Notes. Today we're starting a new section, and we're going to start with graphing quadratic equations in standard form. Our learning target today is to be able to graph quadratic equations in standard form. So, it asks us to compare the following equations and their graph. Our first graph on the left is y equals x plus 3. So, if you guys remember, how do we plug it in? Well, this right here, this is our input. That's what we're going to plug in, and we're going to plug it into the equation y equals plus 3. Okay, so first we would start with -2. When you plug -2 plus 3, you get 1. -1. You get 2. 0, we get 3. 1, you would get 4. 2, you would get 5. Good. All right. So let's go ahead and plot those points. At -2, we're at +1. At -1, we're at 2. At 0, we're at 3. At 1, 4. And there we go. So let's go ahead and graph or draw the line. Remember, we're using a straight edge or ruler. I'm getting my ruler out right now. And there we go. Oh, that was close. Not quite. That's a little better. So there's our line. Okay. And this is called a linear equation. Okay. But what's different? Let's look at our equations. What's the big difference between those two? Well, the one on the right, doesn't that have a square on it? Y equals x squared plus 3. So the equation's a little different, okay? But now we're going to be plugging in the same numbers, but let's watch what happens, okay? Now, when you're plugging this in, you have to be very careful. -2 squared plus 3 gives us 7. Okay, now we're going to plug in -1 squared plus 3, and we get 4. So far this plugging in stuff should be pretty easy. Okay, we get 3 there, but what happens when we plug in 1? What'd you guys get? Oh, we're back to 4, and then when you plug in 2, you should get 7. Okay, so once again, this column right here was our input. That's what we're plugging in for x. And now let's graph it to see what it looks like. Our first point is 0, 3, or one of the points. We have -2, 7. We have -1, 4. But then we have 1, 4, and 2, 7. I've never seen a line like that before. Well, it's because it's not a line, okay? This is called a quadratic equation, okay? And when we're drawing a quadratic, our bottom, it's not going to be, it's not like connect the dots like that at all, okay? When we draw a quadratic, we want it to be curved, okay? So this bottom part, it needs to be curved, okay? So I'm going to write myself a little note right here that it has a curved bottom, okay? And it's not called a linear because it doesn't make the shape of a line. This is a graph of what's called a parabola. Okay, and using the word parabola means you're going to have a graph that looks just like that. Okay, so this chapter that we're talking about is going to be all about quadratics, okay? So the standard form of a quadratic equation is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, okay? If the quadratic term is positive, and the quadratic term, they're talking about the x squared, okay? So if it's positive, it would look like ax squared. It would be a positive, okay? If it's positive, then the graph will open up. But if the quadratic term is negative, and the negative one would look like negative ax squared, then the graph would open down. And you can look at our little smile right here, up or down, kind of telling you what direction it's going to go. So let's take a look. It says determine if the parabola will open up or down and defend your answer. So our quadratic term is the x squared. So is that going to open up or open down? Well, is it positive or negative? It's negative. So if it's negative, it's going to open down. And why? Because our quadratic term is negative 1x squared. All right, what about 2? Where's the quadratic term? It's right there. So is that going to open up or open down? In that case, it's going to open up because our quadratic term is a positive 5x squared. What about 3? Find your quadratic term, up or down. Okay, that's going to be up because our quadratic term is positive 2x squared. Why don't you guys try to do number 4 all on your own? Hopefully you found the quadratic term. The quadratic term is negative 3x squared. So, oh, it's negative. So that means it's going to open down because our ax squared is negative 3x squared. Okay? All right, let's flip it over. So let's talk about some important parts of the parabola. First is the vertex. Okay, the vertex is the highest, which we would say the maximum, or the lowest, which would be the minimum, point. Okay, so it's either the highest or the lowest point. Okay, and how do you find the vertex? Well, to get the first point, the x equals the opposite of b over 2a. I'd be like, whoa, Mr. Grice, what's that? Don't worry, we'll go through it. And to find the y, well, how would we find the y? We would substitute the value of x into the equation. Okay, so first we would find the x, we find out what x is, and then we substitute it in. Okay, now the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is the vertical line that cuts the parabola into equal halves. So let's go through this real quick. The vertex we said is that lowest or highest point, so there's my vertex. The axis of symmetry is this line right here that's cutting it down, okay? And if you notice, the left side and the right side are the exact same. Okay, that's called symmetry. Okay, and how do we find that? Well, we would use the equation x equals the opposite of b over 2a. Now, the y-intercept. Y-intercept is the point 0, comma y, where the parabola intersects the y-axis. So where in the graph does it intersect the y-axis? That would be right there. That is our y-intercept. Okay? Notice there's only one y-intercept. Okay? And the x-intercept would be any point or points where x comma 0, where the parabola intersects the y-axis, or the x-axis, sorry about that. Okay? So in this example right here, we have two x-intercepts, okay? So if we look on our graph real quick, right there's the vertex. This line right here is the axis of symmetry. That's our y-intercept. And then our blue points, those are the x-intercept. Okay, so we got a lot of things going on with that graph. And don't worry, you're not going to have to memorize all of that stuff right away. We're slowly going to get you to do all this stuff. Okay? So, graph the following quadratic function and identify the specified parts. So, we got a lot of work to do. Let's remember that we have y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So that's our a, that's our b, and that's our c. So we can go ahead and plug that in. A would be -1, b would be -2, and c is 3. So does it open up or does it open down? Okay, and why do you think that? Well, that's negative, right? So that means that this graph is going to open down. Now, the next thing we need to find is our vertex, where we take the opposite of b over 2a. So the opposite of -2, 2 times -1. Okay? So you can figure that in your head. The opposite of -2 is 2. 2 times -1 is -2. And 2 times -2 is -1. And we're going to take this number right here, and that goes right in the center. Okay? So that's our first point, but now we need to plug it in to get the y-intercept, or I'm sorry, not the y-intercept, but the other point for the vertex. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to plug it into the equation. We have the opposite, and we're plugging in -1 squared minus 2 times -1 plus 3. So I'm using our equation and plugging it right in, and then we get the point right there. So -1, 4. Okay. Now the axis of symmetry, we already did that. The axis of symmetry is x equals the opposite of b over 2a. Didn't we find that right there? So our axis of symmetry is x equals -1. And the rest of these, we got to figure out what those other numbers are. So, and we've done things like this before, where we want numbers that are the next two numbers up and the next two numbers down. So if I go to the right on a number line, -1 would be 1, 0, and 1, and then -2 and -3. And that's how we fill out the rest of that chart. Okay? So, a couple things that we know already. I know my axis of symmetry is going to be right here. That line is going to cut this in half. Okay? I know my point, -1, 4. So -1, +4. That's our vertex. Now the only thing I'm missing are my other points. And to figure that out, now we're just going to plug it in. Where we've got -3 squared minus 2 times, we're plugging in -3 plus 3. And when you plug that in, you should get 0. And we're going to do it one more time, except now we're going to plug in -2. And when you plug that in, guys, what do you get? I got 3. And now what we said is that graph cuts this in half. Okay, they're mirror images of each other. So I should get 3 and 0 as those points. And if you don't believe me, let's plug it in. Negative, we're plugging in 0 squared minus 2 times 0 plus 3, we got 3. And now we need to plug in 1. Minus 2 times 1 plus 3, and we should get 0. Well, what do you know? Okay, so let's graph those points real quick. We got -2, 3, -3, 0. And there we go. So I'm going to graph this right now. I want to make sure that it's curved. Okay, it's going down like we said it was. And then what's the y-intercept? Well, the y-intercept would be right there, right? Where y equals 0. So that's the point. Negative, oh. Sorry guys, Mr. Grice had a brain fart right there. The y-intercept is where x equals 0. It's this point right here, the y-intercept. So that's the point 0, 3. And the x-intercept is where the x crosses, where it crosses the x-axis. And those points, well, thankfully, it tells us right there. We have the points -3, 0 and 1, 0. Okay. Now, all of those intercepts are not always going to be so easy to find. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit harder. Okay. So just a warning. All right, let's go ahead and look at number 6. The first thing we need to know, A, B, and C. Okay, so our A is 2, our B is -4, and the C is -3. Okay, so first off, does it open up or down? Okay, this one is going to open up because our quadratic term is positive. Okay, now we need to find the vertex and the axis of symmetry. So we're going to use x equals the opposite of b, so opposite of -4, all divided by 2 times -3. So the opposite of -4 is 4. I'm sorry, guys, and this Mr. Grice is having all sorts of brain farts today. 2 times a, which is 2. And 2 times 2 is 4, which gives us 1. So right away, I know that's 1, which means my axis of symmetry is going to be at 1. And now I need to find out what that other value is going to be. So I'm going to use the formula, our new formula, 2 times 1 squared minus 4 times 1 minus 3. And we get -5. So our vertex is +1, -5. So if you wanted to right now, you could go to 1, -5. There we go. Oh, that's not 1, -5. 1, -5. And then I'm also going to draw on my vertex, or my axis of symmetry. Because I know this is exactly where the graph is cut in half. Now, we got to figure out what other points we're going to plug in. Hold on real quick. Okay, so our other points on the number line. So we got 1, we got to go 2 up, which would be 2 and 3, and then 0 and -1. Why don't you guys pause the video and see if you can fill out what those other points are going to be, okay? Good luck. Okay, so there are the points. It should have gotten 0, -3, and -1, +3. And then those are our other points right there. Now, if you didn't get those, you need to come in for extra help. All right, and now what we're going to do is we're going to graph our line. Make sure the bottom is as curved as possible. We got to add our arrows. And now let's go. What's our y-intercept? Remember, the y-intercept is where x equals 0. So we've got the point 0, -3. And now the next thing is we got to find our x-intercepts, and that's where it crosses the x-axis, and that's going to be kind of hard right here. And it's okay to do approximations, okay? So that's close to, our first one is right around -0.5, 0, and our other one is really, really close to 1, about 2.5, right? I'd say that's close to 2.5, 0. Okay, and remember, you're estimating those ones because we don't have a specific point, so just try to get as close as you can. Okay, guys, I know this was a lot to cover and it's really new information, so if you need help, please come find Ms. Carranza or myself. We would love to help you out. Otherwise, your homework is the 8.1 practice, which is right here. So you're checking to see if things are up and down, you're finding the vertex, axis of symmetry, y-intercepts, and then you're graphing too. Okay? So this is Mr. Grice signing off for Algebra Unit 8.1 Notes. Thanks for watching.